Tribute to Duke, the greatest Western star in Hollywood history. Marrying Robert Morrison, born May the 26th, 1907, Winterset, Iowa. He died on June the 11th, 1979, aged 72, Los Angeles, California. A quick glance in chronological order of his greatest and most famous westerns. Some which rate as the greatest westerns of all time. Number 1, The Big Trail, 1930. The Duke plays Brett Coleman leading a wagon train to the promised land. Director Will Walsh took a major gamble in this big budget western, as he put this relatively unknown actor into the lead role in such a big movie. The producer said no, they didn't want Marion Morrison, it was too much of a risk. They wanted Gary Cooper, a much more famous actor. Production was halted as Will Walsh was determined to star this new face. Reluctantly the producers agreed, but on one condition only. They didn't want the name Marion Morrison, sounded too feminine for such a role. Walsh then changed it to John Wayne and a star was almost born. If only they knew who they were actually fighting over. Because John Wayne is the only reason why this very early western is remembered for. For the next 9 years he made over 60 films, a majority being B-westerns. He wasn't an international star yet, but after those 9 years quickly passed, I don't even think he could have known what kind of fame lay ahead. Number 2, Stagecoach, 1939. Nine people travel aboard a stagecoach on a lengthy trip to Lordsburg. They come under constant threat from Geronimo, who has fled the reservation. This is the groundbreaking western that turned the Duke into an overnight star, as he teamed up with director John Ford in one of the most iconic westerns ever. Together they were to go on and make another 6 superlative westerns, to become the greatest director and actor partnership ever known. Number 3, Angel and the Bad Man, 1947. When a gunfighter, Quert Evans, is wounded by an adversary, he's given shelter by a Quaker family who tend to his injuries. Gail Russell is a pretty daughter who takes a keen interest in the stranger. She hopes he will change once recovered and settle down. Evans wants revenge, but is slowly but surely taking a liking to the Quaker girl. Harry Carey is memorable as a laid-back sheriff, giving Evans the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, it was made just a year before John Ford made his Cavalry trilogy, which for me took the sting out of this better than average western. Number 4, Fort Apache, 1948. When a new commanding officer and his daughter arrive at a remote outpost, Colonel Owen Thurston's technique in dealing with Apaches doesn't go down too well. It seems he never dealt with cavalry traditions in dealing with Bronco Apaches, and his inexperience might just get everyone killed. It's really a toss of the coin who the star here, Henry Fonda or John Wayne. But Victor McLaglen is brilliant as Quincannon, who supplies most of the humour. It's the first in the Ford Wayne Cavalry trilogy. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon in Rio Grande will soon complete the trio of westerns. Believe it or not, Colonel Thurston's daughter is played by Shirley Temple, that once little curly-haired child star of The Good Ship, Lollipop. John Agar, who also starred here, was to soon become a real-life husband. It's not the best in the trilogy. That honour arguably goes to She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. Number 5, Red River. Here we got a very mean John Wayne who plays the tough rancher Tom Dunson. The fastest with a gun and a real bad attitude to go with. Montgomery Clift is his foster son Matt on a long and dangerous cattle drive. He doesn't like the way Dunson is treating the men and slave driving them. The drovers have had enough and Matt steps in and ousts Dunson. He swears to catch up with them and get revenge. The men are scared. They know Dunson will keep his word. They later discover a lot of Indian trouble lies ahead. It's either go on or turn back, and they know what lies behind them. They decide to go on, which tells us the calibre of the man Dunson is. It's more like a western version of Captain Bligh and Mutiny in the Bounty. Cause in this trip too, Dunson was your jury executioner. Number 6, Three Godfathers, 1948. Three bank robbers, John Wayne, Harry Carey Jr. and Pedro Armendáriz, come across a dying woman with a small baby in the desert. They promised they'd look after the infant, though none of them had any idea how to tend a young baby. It's a very unlikely plot for three desperados in the run. How they got away with it, I don't know, but Wayne fans like myself will love it. For trivia purposes, the baby's name was Amelia Yelda. The mind boggles because in the film I thought it was a boy, but it was Amelia Yelda, that's fact. Trying to find out what became of Amelia in later life if she became an actress. It's a mystery, nobody seems to know, not even IMDb, of what happened to her. So I guess this mystery trivia could remain unsolved. Number 7, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, 1949. Captain Nathan Brittles is a cavalry officer on the verge of retirement. But first, he's the only man who can possibly avert an Indian uprising. Custer has just fallen at the Little Bighorn and its big Indian medicine. Another defeat like that would set the progress of the West back another 100 years. Again we get stalwart Victor McLaglen back as Sergeant Quincannon. And again, he's the one who provides all the great film's humour. The bar scene is hilarious as Brittles orders his arrest for drinking on duty, even though it was Brittles who tricked him into the bar in the first place. Not even 7 sent to arrest him could cope with the ultra-tough sergeant. Quincannon had a terrible thirst and he was about to retire in a fortnight. Brittles would be gone by then and the new commanding officer might throw the book at him and be dishonourably discharged. So 2 weeks in the cooler would see him retire with all honours. For me, it's quite simply one of the Duke's greatest westerns. Hollywood most certainly doesn't make them like this no more. Number 8, Rio Grande, 1950. The Duke plays Lieutenant Kirby York, stationed near the US-Mexican border. He's up to his eyes in hit-and-run renegade Apaches. They raid into the US border and escape over the Rio Grande into Mexico. He has orders not to cross into Mexico, making it easy for the Indians. When his son Jeff joins his regiment, his wife shows up wanting to buy the boy back out again, and guess what? That lovable big galoot is back with even more hilarity. His horse teaching course is hilarious with Ben Johnson and Harry Carey Jr. A highly entertaining final chapter in the John Wayne Cavalry trilogy. Number 9, Hondo, 1953. Reputed to be John Wayne's most favourite western role is Hondo Lane, an ex-cavalry scout who comes to the aid of a widow and her young son, which was pretty decent of him considering he was the one who made her widow. The Apaches had befriended the lonesome woman, and when they captured Hondo, they later released him thinking he's her husband. The swimming lesson of the young boy is very comical. Hondo tells him he's on the wrong bank, the fish can see his shadow. He needs to cross over to the other bank, but he tells Hondo he can't swim. Big mistake. He's flung in head first. She's worried he might drown. Hondo tells her that's how he learned. He'll be fine, he says, but she wants him to go in after the boy. I said he'll be fine. If you're that worried, you go in after him. But I can't swim either, she cries. Another big mistake, she realises and runs away. Hondo's travelling companion was a mean-looking collie dog with no name. It got me thinking at first, is this the same dog of Wayne's other western, Big Jake? No, how can it be? Big Jake was made 19 years later. Hondo, 1953. Big Jake, 1971. 53. 71. They do look alike. If it weren't for the time gap, you'd swear it was the same dog. If the Duke said it's his most favourite role, then it's a western not to be missed. Number 10, The Searchers, 1956. Rated by some critics as Ford and Wayne's greatest ever western. When his niece is abducted by Comanches, he spends 5 years tracking her down. Henry Brandon, the Comanche chief, Scar, who would later act out a similar role in the John Ford classic Two Rode Together, which also refers to white captives. Here, the Duke plays Ethan Edwards, who has a real hatred of the Redskins. Killing off buffalo so they won't feed Comanche bellies that particular winter. Jeffrey Hunter is Marty, a half-breed adopted brother of the abducted girl. He goes along with you to stop him if he carries out his plans to kill Debbie. She'd been living with the Indians all this time, that fueled Ethan's hatred even more. Iconic classic which is arguably his greatest ever western. With the ending of Ethan walking away being one of the most famous scenes ever. Number 11, Neil Bramall, 1959. For me, it's quite simply the greatest John Wayne western of all time. A Howard Hawks masterpiece, and they simply don't come any better than this. He plays Sheriff John T. Chance, who is forced to hold up in his own jailhouse. Claude Atkins is Joel Burdett, the prisoner locked up for murder. But his brother Nathan is a powerful man and will stop at nothing to release him. He's up against it as he's only got a drunken deputy and an old cripple for help. Dean Martin is Dude, a barfly and one hell of a looking deputy. And Walter Brennan is old Stumpy, a cackling old cripple who watches the jail. If ever anyone was holding the bull by the horns, it was Sheriff John T. Chance. Then along comes Colorado, a flash young gun who sides with the law. When he helps the sheriff out of a sticky situation, with crooner Dean Martin and pop sensation Ricky Nelson on tour, it was pretty obvious a song or two was going to be evident. Policewoman Angie Dickinson adds to the glamour of the sheriff's love interest. But the big tough John ain't got time for romance. The hell he doesn't. Any Western fan who doesn't enjoy this simply isn't a Western fan. Excellent movie. Number 12, The Horse Soldiers, 1959. Colonel John Marlowe was the cavalry officer who was sent behind enemy lines to blow up a strategic Johnny Red railway junction. William Holden is the surgeon ordered to accompany the unit. Only problem is, Marlowe hates surgeons due to his wife dying under the knife. It's also ironic the target is a large railway junction inside a southern town, because before the Civil War, building the railway was how Marlowe made a living. Southern Martin and Denver Pyle are memorable as cameos as Confederate deserters. The enjoyable and funny cameo lingers in the mind. It was to be John Ford's last cavalry picture with the Duke at the helm. Not one that would spring to mind if you were to ask to name 5 John Wayne movies. Nevertheless, it's still highly entertaining once you settle and get into it. Number 13, The Alamo, 1960. Epic historic western depicting the 1836 Texas fight for independence, where a small handful of patriotic Texans died defending a small mission against the might of Santa Anna and his powerful Mexican army. The Duke who played Davy Crockett also directed this explosive western, with Richard Widmark as the famous knife-fighting Jim Bowie. But it was Lawrence Harvey as Travis who easily stole the centre stage. It takes a knee on for the famous battle to begin with other stories involved, but the monumental battle itself is well worth the wait. Crockett was an ex-congressman from Tennessee who brought his men south to hunt and get drunk. They certainly achieved that. But Crockett had another secret agenda to help Texas with its independence. And the way he conned his men into the Alamo is absolutely brilliant. It just has to be seen to be believed, riling up his men like that so they'd fight. Fantastic movie which all Wayne fans would put in their John Wayne top 10. Number 14, North to Alaska, 1960. Righteous mayhem in this Alaskan frontier western. Sam and George, Stuart Granger, and prospecting partners who strike it rich. George sends Sam to Seattle to bring back Jenny, a woman he aims to marry. But Jenny is now married elsewhere, so he brings her back Michelle to console him. That was the plan, but back in Alaska, Big Sam started falling for himself. George was angry at first, nobody could ever replace his Jenny. She tells George she wants Sam, she's fallen for him, but Sam has no idea. He's sulking thinking George and her are now an item. That's when he discovers Sam has fallen for her too, but too stubborn to speak out. It's fantastic and hilarious to see the Duke act like a raging jealous schoolboy. George's little brother is confused. He's never seen Big Sam like this before. Then he hears the music coming from the honeymoon cabin George built. The time was now right, said George, as Sam was in one of his notorious silent periods. With music blaring, he now wants her to scream out laughing. But she can't. She's too nervous. George will soon fix that. He starts tickling her feet till she bursts out laughing. She can't stop. It was more than a jealous man could take. It's so hilarious. Absolutely brilliant, and the funniest scene of the Duke's entire career. All's well ends well in this Henry Hathaway classic. What a big baby. Number 15, The Comancheros, 1961. This is another huge western I put into the John Wayne top 10. He plays Texas Ranger Jake Cutter, who's undercover to find Comancheros, a hidden society of white men running with hostile Comanches. Lee Marvin is memorable as a Tully Crow, a half-scalp contact man for the outfit. But Marvin fans will be disappointed. He only appears in a few righteous scenes. But those memorable scenes most definitely linger in the mind. Stuart Whitman is a gambler Paul Regret, wrongly wanted for murder. But when he says the Rangers from a Comanchero attack, he's sworn in and accompanies Big Jake to find the location of the secret society. When they run into Indians, Big Jake tells them to put his gun away. They're tame Indians. Paul was new to the West and couldn't understand. It was just like that gopher snake they ran into. It was a friendly snake. You can see thousands like it, but when you see your first rattler, then you'll know the difference, which still didn't explain a lot to Paul Regret. One look, he replies, and you'll know the difference between tame and wild Indians. He was that green out west that even I wouldn't know the difference. I mean, if you get an arrow in your back, then that's a wild Indian. Excellent western, which was sadly director Michael Curtis's final swan song. Number 16, The Man That Shot Liberty Valance, 1962. It was to be John Ford and John Wayne's final western, which made in black and white, which boasted the biggest two western stars of all time, Wayne and James Stewart. But here, Lee Marvin is back in a much more prominent role as an outlaw, Liberty Valance. And in truth, he was the real star of this iconic western, which is rather a bold statement considering the two legends that starred with him. A young Lee Van Cleef and Strother Martin play the two henchmen. Stewart plays the aged senator who travels to the small town of Shinbone to attend a funeral, which is big news, but who was Tom Donovan? The film then goes back in time to the days of the Wild West in Shinbone, where the student practicing for an attorney of law meets Tom Donovan, with his written views invoking the wrath of Liberty Valance. The toughest man this side of the picket wire next to Donovan, that is. Another classic which some critics believe is the Ford Wayne top western. Then again, if we all agreed on the greatest movie in the Wayne filmography, then what a boring place Hollywood journals would be. Personally, I think this is the greatest film. Isn't even a western, but still directed by John Ford. It's The Quiet Man, 1952, and many critics agree, some don't. And that's what makes films so interesting and debatable. Which ones are the best? So I guess it's best to agree to disagree. Number 17, McClintock, 1963. Righteous comedy western with the Duke George Washington McClintock, a tough hombre who tamed the Wild West but couldn't tame his estranged wife. Maureen O'Hara is the fiery redhead in her second of three westerns with the Duke, Rio Grande 1950 and Big Jake 1971 being the other two, not to mention The Quiet Man. When Kate returns home to deal with their daughter's affairs, she discovers the lovely Yvonne DiCarlo as the household's new cook. She ain't happy about it, which culminates in all hell breaking loose. In case you're wondering, DiCarlo was famous for being Lily out of the Munsters. Plenty of humour in this mainly forgotten western, with Kate getting what all spoilt little brats deserve. Number 18, The Sons of Katie Elder, 1965. When four brothers who hadn't seen one another in years head home for their mother's funeral, they discovered their father was murdered on their ranch, now owned by a ruthless businessman. The murderer was never found, but they aimed to find the low-down snake that killed him. Big George Kennedy is memorable as Curly, a hired gun who gets off the train, hired by Hastings to take care of the elders if trouble was to start. It's hardly a whodunit, as we know from the start it was Hastings who done it. But proving it, well, that was another story. The scene where the Duke knocks out Kennedy with a wagon wheel spoke. It's absolutely crunching. Every time I see it, I can feel that blow myself. But not as much as Curly must have felt it. I dare say this Hathaway Western will be many's most favourite Wayne film. And why not? It's got everything any Western drama ought to have. Number 19, The War Wagon, 1967. Todd Jackson out on parole gathers a team of misfits to rob the War Wagon. A heavily guarded stage carried gold dust from the mines to the bank. It once belonged to Jackson before he was set up and imprisoned. Pierce now also owns Todd's ranch and hires a gunfighter Lomax to kill Jackson. Kirk Douglas is Lomax, who's also been hired by Jackson for the robbery. Others in Todd's misfits are Howard Keel as the trouble-making Indian Levi Walkenbear. Les Fletcher, played by Keenan Wynn, who'd steal your eyes out of your head if you weren't looking. A young Billy Wyatt, Robert Walker, a full-time drunk trusted with explosives. An entertaining western with Howard Keel supplying most of the humour. Number 20, El Dorado, 1967. Ride, bully, ride till you find El Dorado. Howard Hawks' classic, very similar to his Rio Bravo and his Rio Lobo. All three westerns are mainly set inside a jail guarding a prisoner. Each is a young flash gun and an elderly old critter always guarding the bad boy. It's easy to understand why some get confused by the three films. We get John Wayne in all three and a prisoner where his friends aim to free him. Three old-timers who guard the prisoners: Arthur Honeycutt, El Dorado; Walter Brennan, Rio Bravo; Jack Ellum, Rio Lobo. Then we got the young flash guns: James Caan, El Dorado; Ricky Nelson, Rio Bravo; George Rivero, Rio Lobo. Not to mention two drunken lawmen, Robert Mitchum and Dean Martin. So I guess it's easy to understand why non-Wayne fans can get confused. Nevertheless, this particular western is a must for the John Wayne Top 10. Number 21, True Grit. Hathaway classic which finally won John Wayne an Oscar for Best Actor. Playing the one-eyed US Marshal Rooster Cogburn, he thoroughly deserved his award. Kim Darby is a teenage Matty Ross who hires Cogbird to find her father's killer. Don't let that innocent face fool you, or you could be up against lawyer J. Noble Daggett. Country western singer Glenn Campbell was a Texas Ranger who joins the hunt. He's drank muddy water from a horse's footprints, which causes Rooster some uncertainty. Elvis Presley was offered the Texas Ranger role, but it didn't quite take off, due to a stupid argument by his agent demanding Elvis get top billing. That honour was obviously going to the Duke, so Elvis' offer was refused. Damn it, I'm a huge Duke and Elvis fan, it could have been very interesting. Still, I take nothing away from this brilliant western, which is a definite top 10. Number 22, The Undefeated, 1969. After the Civil War, a Confederate unit led by Rock Hudson head to Mexico, but are taken prisoner by a despot general and held for ransom. They will all be executed if his demands are not met. His army badly needs horses. John Henry and his ex-cavalry unit have been rounding up wild horses to sell to the US Army until they get word of the Confederate situation. They agree to part with the animals for the release of the captain. There was still a few raw open wounds between both parties, which resulted in a very memorable, hilarious party scene when the Confederates invite the Yanks for some southern hospitality. The inevitable is bound to happen in a huge free-for-all. It was a friendly so-called fight, which is one of this film's greatest scenes. It's one of the best late John Wayne westerns. Number 23, Chisholm, 1970. The 1970s was to see the rapid decline of the westerns. It was a dying genre, with the Duke making 8 more up to 1976. By now, the great western stars and directors of the 50s and 60s were almost gone. Wayne and only 6 years western star Clint Eastwood was to keep the genre alive. Others were made with western stars in the twilight, but not as memorable as the Duke's late films and the new kid Eastwood's western. Chisholm was set during the Lincoln County War and the Duke's first Billy the Kid theme. Chisholm is top dog who virtually owns Lincoln County. That isn't until a ruthless businessman moves in and steps on Chisholm's toes. Entertaining enough, but he's made better in the 70s. Number 24, Real Lobo, 1970. After the Civil War, a colonel sets out to find a traitor who sold information to the Rebs. On Yankee trains carrying gold bullion where one raid got his friend killed. Really enjoyable 70s western, but sadly it was to be Howard Hawks' final film. Jack Helm was ever so memorable as the old man Phillips, who easily stole centre stage. After viewing the movie, the Duke agreed that most certainly did. For me, it's by far the Duke's greatest western of that era. Number 25, Big Jake, 1971. It's by far the most violent western the Duke has ever made. With western stalwart Richard Boone excellently cast as baddie John Fane. It's the turn of the 20th century. The gunfighters and train robbers are all but gone. Big Jacob McCandles is a dying breed, the last of his kind from the Wild West. In fact, he too is thought long dead by many, including John Fane. When Fane and his cutthroat gang kidnapped Big Jake's grandson, his wife Martha, who he hadn't seen in years, sends for him to try and retrieve the boy. Jake then teams up with his 2 sons and an Indian tracker to go after the outlaws. Not forgetting that mean-looking collie dog. Are we just glad the Duke was there to keep the Western genre going? Excellent film which would have been censored if made during the 50s for its violence. Number 26, The Cowboys, 1972. A highly controversial western due to its young stars killing the baddies. Again, this western would have been most certainly banned for its violence years ago. Not that it didn't already cause a stir after its release date, when its ranch hands walk out on him after a nearby gold strike. Cattleman Will Anderson hires schoolboys for a long and dangerous cattle drive. Poor Bruce Dern was to cause even more controversy as the outlaw Longhair. Never before had John Wayne ever been so violently manhandled, as Longhair beat him to death. The public couldn't accept it and were in total shock at the savage killing. Killing the most iconic western star like that actually hindered his career. The public shock was to soon unbelievably turn into rage and anger, which resulted in Bruce Dern receiving many real-life death threats. I must admit, the brutal onslaught on the aged Duke was rather disturbing, which proved the utmost respect the entire planet had for John Wayne. An enjoyable Matt Rydell classic if you can decipher the fiction from the real. Number 27, The Train Robbers, 1973. Anne Margaret is a beautiful widow wanting to clear her dead husband's name. She hires a motley crew of misfits to dig up gold bullion her hubby allegedly stole. They intend to return the gold to its lawful owner, not realising there's going to be a huge sting in the tail. A fantastic and humorous ending as they realise they're being had. And now they ain't called the train robbers for nothing. Number 28, Cahill, US Marshal, 1973. J.D. Cahill is a lawman who discovers his two young sons are involved in a bank heist. He hires Apache trackers, but there's no signs of the bank robbers, which means whoever they are, they must still be in town. George Kennedy is brilliant as the outlaw who involved Cahill's two sons in the robbery, planning the perfect alibi as he was in town jail during the raid. But the honours go to Neville Brand as a comical western, as a half-breed Comanche Lightfoot who doesn't feel pain. When he breaks his leg, he yells like hell. I thought a bona fide Comanche war chief didn't feel pain, utters the Duke. He doesn't, replies Lightfoot. It's the white part of him that's hurting. Wayne fans will love it purely for its abundance and comical one-liners. Number 29, Rooster Cogburn, 1975. It's quite simply a brilliant case of True Grit meets The African Queen. The Duke is back in the role that won him his Oscar years ago, with Katharine Hepburn in a similar African Queen missionary role. This time she's bringing the Lord's word to the Red Indies until her reverend father is killed. Together they ride out to find the killers, and yet again, like Humphrey Bogart before him, it's his turn for some serious Bible Passion lectures. We couldn't compare it to True Grit or The African Queen for that matter. But with those two films in mind, it does make this western very likeable. Number 30, The Shootist, 1976. Sadly, this sentimental western was to be the Duke's final movie. It was the turn of the century, the Wild West was long gone. John Bernard Boots was the very last of the legendary gunfighters. But he too was dying from a very rare advanced cancer. He had read about old Queen Victoria, who had just passed away with dignity intact. He planned to go out the same way. It boasts an impressive cast from Hollywood's golden era like Richard Burton, Lauren Bacall, John Carradine and the elderly legendary James Stewart as the Carson City doctor who confirmed Boots' ailment. A horrible death. He was going to die in agony, but if he had Boots' courage, he wouldn't die the death he just described. The gunfight itself was rather sombre, and knowing this was the Duke's last film, he even had his own headstone made for the occasion. The barman was to finish him off. Shot in the back. A very sad moment in Hollywood history. The Duke himself was dying of cancer and lost that battle 2 years later. Thank you for watching this John Wayne tribute. To see more homemade films of interest, just click on or subscribe. Thanks folks.